You might have learned about him in history class. You've definitely heard his name, Alexander the Great. But what if I told you there's more to his story than meets the eye? Well, that's what we're here to do today. Look beyond the legends. Here is Alexander the Great. Welcome to our series, Hero or Tyrant, where we examine the legacies of history's most powerful people, the good, the bad, and everything in between. So let's start at the beginning. Intro 1. The young King Alexander the Great. Born in 356 BCE, Alexander was the son of King Philip II of Macedonia and tutored by Aristotle himself. From a young age, he was trained in philosophy, politics, and war. By age 20, after his father's assassination, Alexander became king and quickly began his campaign to conquer the known world. So far, so good. But let us fast forward a bit, because Alexander would go on to carve an empire out of the ancient world, conquering from Greece to India in just 11 years. And it started with one of the greatest empires in history, the Achaemenid Empire. It was massive, spanning from Central Asia to North Africa. They had a vast military, advanced infrastructure, and ruled over dozens of different peoples. The Persians were led by King Darius III, a warrior king in his own right. But Alexander and his army were a force to be reckoned with. In 334 BC, Alexander's army crossed the Hellespont into Anatolia, then part of the Achaemenid Empire. Soon after, they faced off against the Persians of the Granicus River. The battle was brutal, but Alexander's forces were victorious. This kicked off a chain reaction, one victory after another. At Issos in 333 BCE, Alexander defeated Darius III, inflicting heavy casualties and capturing the royal family. And finally, there was Gaugamela in 331 BCE. This decisive battle marked the end of the Achaemenid Empire. After Darius fled, fearing for his life, Babylon fell without a fight and Persepolis was set ablaze. Alexander was now master of the known world. But these weren't just battles, they were massacres. Entire cities were burned, tens of thousands killed. Victory at a cost. That leads us to one of the most infamous sieges in history. When Tyre resisted Alexander's rule, he laid siege for 7 months. He built causeways to cut off supplies, brought in warships to blockade the coast, and sent in troops to attack from within. He constructed towers over 30 meters high to scale the city walls. When Tyre fell, Alexander ordered 8,000 civilians put to death and 2,000 crucified along the coast. This wasn't mercy, it was message. Resist me and you'll be arrested. Now, you could argue Alexander was a product of his time, a ruthless general in an era of even more ruthless general. But when we look closely at his record, we see a pattern emerge. While Alexander's been called a great conqueror, many scholars point to another Genghis Khan. Like Khan, Alexander left a path of devastation in his wake. He razed cities, slaughtered populations, and left millions displaced. In fact, some historians estimate that around 7 million people lost their lives during Alexander's conquests, roughly 15% of the population. To call that anything other than genocide is hard to justify. That said, we can't tell this story without talking about the legacy of Hellenism. Alexander truly believed that Greece was superior and felt compelled to impose Greek culture on everyone else. He established hundreds of cities throughout his empire, many named Alexandria. But instead of cultural exchange, there was cultural erasure. Local religions were destroyed, artifacts looted, and scholars forced to convert. In Egypt, Alexander was welcomed as a liberator. He entered the country in 332 BC, where he was crowned pharaoh and founded the city of Alexandria, which would become a center of knowledge and trade. But while he promoted Greek culture, he also demanded deification. He declared himself son of Zeus and demanded worship in the Egyptian style. Many Egyptians converted, but not without push. The truth is, Alexander's empire was built on conquest, maintained through brute force. And the minute he stopped, it all came tumbling down. After defeating the Persians, Alexander turned his sights on the Indian subcontinent. His goal, conquer the Indus Valley and make the borders of his empire touch the ocean. He reached the Beas River in 326 BCE, where he fought the Battle of the Hydaspes River against King Porus. While Alexander's heavy infantry and cavalry were able to defeat the war elephants used by Porus, his soldiers were exhausted and wanted to go home. Ultimately, Alexander won, but this victory came at a great cost. His army was decimated. Many never returned home. Those that did were forever changed. But Alexander was still unsatisfied. He wanted more. If he hadn't died in 323 BCE, it's likely he would have pressed on further into India or China. However, Alexander's ambitions can't be discussed without addressing his state of mind. Let's rewind to the Battle of Granicus River, Alexander's first major engagement against the Persians. Here he suffered serious injuries, including a life-threatening wound to the chest. That's only one account of several that paint a picture of a reckless leader willing to take huge risks for the sake of glory. Some even claim he deliberately rode ahead of his troops to get injured during the battle. Others claim that he kept riding his horse straight into the enemy until he was surrounded. That's the image most historians agree on. Alexander on horseback in the thick of battle, taking charge. But the stories surrounding that image reveal a growing darkness. Some say Alexander developed a serious alcohol problem, exacerbated by the stress of battle and grief after losing his beloved horse. He grew increasingly paranoid, lashing out at anyone. He even executed his own officers for perceived disloyalty. Historians believe he experienced bouts of mania, during which he would yell at his generals, sometimes staying awake for days, demanding impossible timelines and threatening to replace them if they failed. It was a far cry from the brainy philosopher king we often imagine. Instead, we see a man struggling with his demons, fighting a losing battle with his mental health. With each passing year, Alexander became more erratic, and by the time of his death, he was barely recognizable. But how did he die? We don't know for sure. What we do know is that Alexander died at just 32, too young to have his body turned to dust. In fact, some accounts say he died in his bed, suggesting a peaceful end. But that doesn't explain the circumstances. What killed him? Poison, malaria, or alcohol? Maybe a combination. Perhaps someone close to him wanted him dead. There are rumors, but no proof. What we do know is that his empire didn't last long after he died. Power struggles among his generals plunged the empire into decades of war, ending the brief period of peace Alexander had imposed. That leads us to the final question. Was Alexander a visionary leader? Many think he was. They see him as a man who united East and West under one culture, spreading knowledge and inspiring generations. But there's another way to look at it. Alexander the Great may have been the blueprint of imperial brutality, a man whose insatiable desire for power and glory paved the way for centuries of colonization. He conquered, colonized, and exploited, and when he's gone, his empire crumbled. So we leave the ultimate question for you. If you enjoyed this episode, check out the series. We've got videos on Genghis Khan, Napoleon, and more. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more episodes. Thank you for watching. See you next time.